Hi, I'm Gill Holden, Principal Officer of the Early Childhood Unit here at the National Children's Bureau. And today I'm joined by Candi Roberts, who's the head teacher at Claremont Primary School in Tunbridge Wells. Candi, thank you so much for giving up your time and joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Jill. It's so lovely to be here to join you.
Oh, thank you. So to set the scene as we get going, would you be able to just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your school, please?
Yes, of course. As you've said, my name is Candi Roberts and I'm very proud to be the head teacher at Claremont Primary School in Tunbridge Wells. We are a two-form entry school in Kent, and every year we welcome 60 new learners to our school. We're incredibly lucky with our outdoor provision, and we do have a strong outdoor learning ethos for all of the children in the school, which is really exciting for our new learners because it includes a pond, an outdoor classroom and a forest school area. So it's very, very exciting place to come when you're 4.
Oh, I can imagine. That sounds wonderful. Oh, fabulous. So what we want to talk about today is the changes, the revised EYFS and the reforms that took place almost a year ago now. And so to start us off with, what have been the most significant changes for you and your school since the introduction of the EYFS reforms?
Well, our early years team have found that removing the mid-year assessment, it's meant much less pressure for them trying to prove the judgments as they move along, instead of being able to really get to know the children historically. And so they're really pleased that that's been removed midway through. They also feel that it's allowed for them to be professionals, and it's developed a trust, a far deeper and valid trust in the teacher judgments. They also think that it helps them to focus much more on the curriculum and unpicking it, thinking about what are we teaching, how are we teaching it, when and why. And although that still evolves in an early years classroom, they're continually questioning their practice, then being mindful of the needs of the current children, and they've found they've had far more opportunity to do that. The removal of the exceeding judgment has also been something that we've found really exciting. It takes off that limit for a child to think, well, you can only reach this. So they can grow and grow and grow and grow as rich little people in a wider sense, rather than an upward tick boxy sense. So they're the significant things that we've found as a school.
Oh, thank you. That sounds like it's been a really positive change for you, and sort of being able to have that more child focus as well sounds excellent. So how has practice changed, specifically in regard to observation and assessment?
Well, obviously, the observation is a continual part of the early years provision, and the early years team have found that now it's really much more about noticing the children in a more in the moment way, particularly for those children who, if you weren't doing your formal observation, that maybe haven't joined in, or then they haven't kept up with something, or those quiet children that you have to really focus on carefully. So they found that they've been really able to choose who and when and why, and make those observations much more purposeful, rather than trying and worrying all the time about collating copious amounts of evidence. They really felt that obsessive collecting of evidence didn't always help them to know the children as well as they feel they do this year with the children. And they're no longer trying to do a long observation because they haven't done one on that child. They're trying to make it much more about who needs that, who don't they know as well, who haven't they seen do that. And again, sort of removing that tick boxing culture that they felt was really part of the previous system. So that whole time is much more now about children. They feel much more about in the moment, noticing everything that they're able to do. And the other thing that we've found as a school is because we're not using the software that we may have used before to track things or to upload things, that actually that saved an enormous amount of time after school, you know, with that kind of a system, and also the cost implications of that as well for us as a school. So so in terms of that, they're the true benefits they feel around that observation and assessment.
That's great. That sounds like they're really sort of be able to spend the time in getting to know the likes and dislikes and the abilities of each and every child that they're looking after and educating. That sounds great. So in finding that, it sounds like you're already telling this, but our teachers actually find they're able to spend more time interacting with children, and do they feel that's benefited teachers and children alike?
Yes, so they've always really been very proud of the way they interact with the children, but they really feel, as I've said already, that it's much easier now to react with the children in the moment, and you know, make sure that they're planning for the next steps rather than planning for who are we going to observe next, you know, and who haven't we got evidence for. They've also found that it's really useful for the new staff members. So we've had some new team members. It's really helped them to get to know children as a whole, bringing in all of their interests and helping them to plan from the children in a much more purposeful and meaningful way than they did previously, where they weren't really able to capture everybody's thoughts. You know, we have 30 in each class. That's a lot of little people to listen to every day. So they found that a huge benefit. They think that that's really supported the well-being of the children, and they also mentioned that they think it's supported the well-being of the staff team. So because that pressure's taken off for all that additional paperwork, post-its, photographs, sticking in, writing comments and all of those kind of things.
Fabulous. That sounds great. Thank you. So how has your school approached the EYFSP, the Early Years Foundation Stage Profile, and has it changed how you approach it since the reforms?
So in terms of how we assess at the end, it's been much more about professional dialogue, and that's taken place all through the year. Progression is built into our curriculum, and as a whole school we've always been really keen to make sure that everyone in the school knows what's going on in the early years. So you know, the maths leads, it's important that they know what's taking place. It's much easier for them to understand what this looks like for children now, although if they're from the top end of the school, you know, it takes a little bit of unpicking because it's a slightly different culture there. But they also feel that they're able to identify things earlier. So any additional needs that, you know, they're spotting that much earlier on this year. They've found that much more useful, particularly as this coincides with the baseline as well in that first 6 weeks. So they found that really useful. They've been able to be proactive, they've said, and not reactive, which again, you know, is indicative of the fact that, you know, it's not because, oh, we suddenly don't have anything for that child in this area, because it's that continual professional conversation. They also moderate as a team. They meet together across the classes, all of the adults in there and not just the teachers. And we also have pupil progress reviews 3 times a year. And within that, they still are using provision maps. So although they're not tracking them, at the pupil progress review now, we're asking them to hold the discussions about each child, who they are, you know, as a person, not how we've assessed them and what are you doing about the next gap. You know, we've talked about that in the planning, and we talk about what they think the child has got opportunity for. And we've also talked about, you know, as the head teacher, I still want to know, do you feel that these children have the potential to be successful towards their early learning goals at the end of the year? You know, that this, we don't believe this is saying by not tracking them that we're not wanting to monitor how their progress is going, but what we're not wanting to do is to show less meaningful conversations, less meaningful documentation along that journey. So those meetings themselves now are much less much less pressurized for the staff, because again they were trying to collate lots of information to bring along to that, and when you've got 17 areas to consider, you know, and your Venn diagrams depending on your system, that was a lot for them. So now we're focusing on, you know, what have you got in your provision map, how is your planning going, you know, and then talking about each of the children and their journey. So so it's a real progressive, holistic, continual event.
Fabulous, thank you. So in your experience, what works well for ensuring teachers have what they need to enable ambitious progress for each child, and separately, what's needed to give head teachers, governors, MAT leaders, local authority leaders, etc., to have confidence that teachers know where children are, where they're at, and how helping each child progress and reach their good level of development at the end of reception, so that they've got a good transition into year one.
So so we do a number of things for this. So I'm going to start with how do we think about the senior leadership team and the governors and their expectations. So as the head teacher, obviously it was really important for me to have a really good understanding of what these reforms would mean and what that would look like for us on the ground. And we have a very dedicated assessment manager who deals with our assessment systems, and you know, he's worked very hard to make sure this is an effective and purposeful provision for us. But this really challenged what was in place for the rest of the school. So it's been a real journey. So we wanted to ensure that everybody understood. So the early years team did some inset training with the whole staff team, including the SLT and the Maths and English leads in particular, and we went down into the early years provision and they gave us some activities to do, and then they asked some other people to just observe, and they gave them some of the early learning goals, you know, to see, you know, what might be taking place here. And you've got no assessment, but how might you've got no assessment criteria as such as you might have through the national curriculum and the way that we assess there. What might that look like for the person observing these children and watching them while they're playing? And it was a mixture of the adults playing there, which was great fun, but it really developed a really solid understanding of the difference, the rightful difference between purposeful play and what that looks like in the early years, and how that can support them as they move through the school. And that was a really good start for us. So they understood, the whole school understood that. We then asked the early years team if they would be happy to speak to the governors about the reform. So rather than me share, they came along and did a short presentation, and they were thrilled to do that. And the governors were just so overwhelmed at the expertise and the skill of the early years team, and also what that might look like, and how they're able to keep track and monitor the children. So it was really new for us, and it did follow a pandemic. So we had lots of questions around, well, how are you going to deal with recovery, and how will you, you know, make sure that there aren't any gaps as they transition into year one? So there were those discussions going on, both internally with the subject leads, but also with the governing body. And so we just shared with them that what I was saying with you earlier about how we talk all the way through the year and how we focus on those children. And, you know, I think, as I said earlier, I think the other thing that we described to them was it's actually a misconception, in our opinion, to say that the team are not tracking. Of course they're tracking, you know, they track, observe, plan daily. But the way they're doing it is different to that regular approach, and they were really inspired by that approach, and they felt that that would be very welcome also from the parental body. Because it's based on children, but also the cultural capital that your school needs, and providing those experiences that the children might need also to support that provision and give them that opportunity. That hasn't changed. So I think that reassured them that this was just about how we record. The professional practice hasn't changed. You know, it's just you know, a paperwork thing that's changed and taken that pressure off the now smiling early years team who don't have a camera strapped to them or a pack of post-it notes.
I love that, and it's again going back to what we were saying earlier about that professional trust as well, isn't it? Which is fabulous, and like you say, that the staff are now smiling. That's brilliant.
Yeah. To raise your point then about the transition into year one.
Yes.
So we have transition meetings with the teachers as you would expect, and I'm sure, you know, every school does a similar, or, you know, some form of a transition meeting. And as I say, this year particularly, we found that PSE was the one thing that we really needed to get across in those conversations, and they're ongoing at the moment. Particularly the building relationships. We found that the children, for us at school, that was something that we really needed to make sure that the year one teachers recognised was in progress. You know, we weren't fully secure there at the end of the time. The other early learning goal that was new, that also we felt was really useful for the year one team to really recognise, was the one around fine and gross motor, because again, that concept of how do we use our hands really impacts on, you know, that year one curriculum as they move into that blend of, you know, a more formal educational setting with some continuous provision and those kind of things. We also asked the year one team to take part in internal moderation of those final assessments with the early years team during term at the beginning of term 6, so that again they could see how the teachers were making those judgments and that conversation that they were having that helped them secure that. The year one team found that really useful. I think they're still ongoing, but they've got quite a few of those done. And also that in year one, the child initiated activities still take place, and we do plan, do, review in our year one. So again, the early years team were able to share the areas that could be developed through that as well as they move forward. So the transition actually was deeper than it has been previously, because it's not just about a sheet of paper with a lot of data on it, or a book for somebody to look through. It is about, you know, that professional dialogue.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. That's really interesting to reflect that actually your transitions have got deeper, and I think like we were talking about earlier about that professional judgment and trust, and also that real communication. It sounds like this process is enabling your year one teachers to really get to know the children as they're coming to join them.
Yeah, and what we're hoping is that we have a new teacher in year one. He'll just be next year in his second ECT year, so this will, you know, the first time that the children have come to him from a year one, from an early years class here. So that's great for him. He's actually going to go down into the early years as well, just to observe the children before they come up to him, so that he can get a real sense of who they are. So I think that will be really supportive too.
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like you've already outlined lots and lots of positive things that have happened as a result of the reforms. Do you have any anecdotal evidence from staff reactions to the reforms?
So they shared some tips as well. They're really pleased with the reforms. They really feel that for the first time in a very long time, they're able to be with children. They're able to see them at the age that they are, and not as the process of a learning journey, you know, and they're really instrumental in providing support for their child development. You know, and that's so important in a school, for that to be so secure before they're able to move up to that more formal national curriculum. They have some tips. Their tips are, don't try to change it all at once. They found take your time, do an area really well at a time, and so talk about it, reflect on it, review it, and if it hasn't quite worked how you thought it should do, have another try with a slight tweak. And so they found the year has been, you know, a year of, as I say, discussion, but around the way they're doing things. And they have said, to make it really clear, put down your camera, put down your post-its and be with the children.
Brilliant. I love that, and I'm sure that's made it really, you know, a much more enjoyable time as well, being with the children in that way.
Yeah, lots of laughing, lots of singing. You go into the early years, it's an absolute buzz, and it was before, but it just feels a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more liberated, and that's just fantastic.
That's really fabulous. Yeah, thank you. That's brilliant. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Candi?
I think the other thing that the team just wanted to share as well, that they really liked about the reforms, they recognised that, you know, that it's been a big change. They recognised, you know, and I've recognised on their behalf, they needed time to get things in place. They needed to be able to talk about, well, what will it look like and how will it work and what does that mean and those kind of things. It was okay to get it not quite right, but they really felt it really helped them to focus more on early childhood development, to focus on early number and number sense. And they really liked the fact that that was around number sense and not just, again, a tick box of driving to, you know, we all recognise sometimes our children come in and some of our very enthusiastic parents might say, oh, they can already count to 100. Oh yeah, they can calculate, you know, so they were really excited by that number sense. They were really pleased that the technology was removed. They feel that in a modern world, that's who we are, that's what we do, and that was quite outdated to have that as an add-on, as something for us to be trying to get evidence for. And they just wanted, again, a reminder that, you know, that a clear message is that the early learning goals should not be tracked against, and they fought really hard for that, as I say, along this journey, and that's been the most liberating thing for them, that you know, it is about children, you know, it is about, you know, seeing how they move forward on a daily basis without having to worry, right, oh, I've missed that, you know, and I've got to rush off and get a piece of paper now to write it all down. So so yeah, really positive first year for us.
Excellent. Oh, that's fabulous to hear, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences with me, and I'm sure all of the people who are watching this on the Foundation Years website will share in thanking you for sharing those experiences as well.
Oh, you're very welcome. I hope it's useful to people.
Thank you.